What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, by the time people are listening to this, I bet many are still talking about the slide of a certain quarterback that many people expected to be a first-round pick. Quinn Ewers, man. Like, wow. Crazy. Quinn Ewers, the story of the draft as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, once upon a time, first-round lock, and then, just kept falling. By the way, did kind of get that right. I said he would go 150 overall on day 3 to the Dolphins. Now, he didn't go 150 overall. He went on day 3 to the Dolphins. Kind of a called shot, a little bit, just saying.
Yeah, and then you're saying NFL front office is not Mel Kiper are calling you right now to get your opinion.
Right, exactly. Poor Mel, man. The Shedeur Sanders fall is actually was clearly the story of the draft, wherein Mel Kiper went full, what was it, Trent Dilfer, Colts draft. What was it? I don't remember what draft it was, like 93 or something. But it was basically just that all over again. Just unbelievable all-time Mel Kiper. What a legend he is. But, Will, my question to you, have you pronounced Tyler Shough successfully yet?
Second topic. I knew it. I feel like it's, and I'm trying to say, is it S-U-C-K?
Shough.
Is it Tyler? Okay.
His name is not Tyler Suck.
So that's what we're going to do
Shough.
now that we have him. Okay. That's the Freudian slip on my part.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's easy because it rhymes with what we're going to do. So I'll never forget it again.
Look, we don't hate on Joe Moorhead disciples, which Tyler Shough technically is. It's easier to find the people that Tyler Shough didn't play for as opposed to the ones he did play for.
I was going to say, I think he was a guest columnist when I was at SDS. It's crazy to see him in the draft.
Yeah, he had a 2-year hiatus in which he started writing and blogging stuff for us. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, having a guy that old who, let's just say, long injury history, but who knows? Michael Penix proved anything is possible if you can finish the season. And maybe the same is true for Tyler Shough. But yeah, we have, look, I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole of all the different thoughts I had during the draft because obviously that was a week ago. So I thought we'd kind of spin it forward today. We have a new thing that we're going to do with the draft being in the books. We have a draft of our own with drafting SEC players that we believe will be first round picks in 2026. We've never done before. Couldn't end up looking like absolute idiots. Whatever. Don't care. We've also got the legend Barry Tramel coming up in a bit to talk a bunch of Oklahoma stuff. Great discussion about that and all things Heupel. I mean, just somebody that has been around for so long and knows a ton about this sport. And then we're going to close with Lad of the Week. But first, before we get into all that, a quick word from our friends at Dabble. NBA playoffs. It's look. It hasn't been kind to the city in which I live in, the certain Orlando Magic, but I do hear that they are going on and they have been a lot of fun so far. And if you're one of those people that's looking to get in on the action, Dabble is the place to go. It is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space, and they've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none. They offer a wide variety of sports making picks, including, as I mentioned, NBA playoffs. We've got MLB going on. Use that promo code SDS2 when you sign up today to receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. That's promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. Will, we're drafting SEC first rounders for 2026. And there's a key distinction that we need to reference here. Okay. I realize that some will read that too quickly and just say you're drafting future first round picks. No. This is just for 2026. And this is a wide open category. We're not saying, who's going to be the first guy picked from the SEC. We're just saying first round picks, SEC 2026. A lot of different ways that you can go. A ton of different, like, do you want to get public support and win the draft now and just win the vote? You could do that. Or do you want to be right a year from now and not feel like a moron looking back on your takes? I want to be right a year from now. That's going to be my strategy in this. You won our non-quarterback Heisman draft in the vote. But I am still holding out hope that, like last year with Travis Hunter, my pick of Travis Hunter, I think technically wins me that draft.
I was gonna say you won the Heisman. That seems like a pretty open and shut case. Yeah.
So look, I'm gonna play the long game here. I'm gonna say right now I'm gonna lose the popular vote. I think I'm gonna lose the popular vote. I'm gonna play the long game, and we can only pick players that are going to be draft eligible from the SEC in 2026. And I think my draft will reflect that strongly in a couple of ways. There's a little teaser. I have 27 SEC guys written down, Will. I have 27 names, and I'm going to set the over-under here. This is an unofficial side bet over-under between you and I. I think the over-under should be at 1.5 guys that you will pick that are not on my list of 27.
Oh, wow. So you think I'm going to go over? This is going to be chaos. I'm so ready for this. Yeah. And given that, I do want to give the caveat here, because as you look back and we try to, see how we did a year ago, a lot of guys end up coming back to college. Just worth saying. When we look back at this, that's what I keep running into is eligibility, where it's like, wait, that guy actually only played 2 years, a la Tyrann Mathieu, and can leave. Whereas this guy has been here, a la a certain quarterback that plays for one of our teams, since what feels like the Obama administration. And so truly, like, if you are in college and you're over 2 years, it feels like you could go, but you could be up to, we got past COVID and everything, so up to 5 or even 6 sometimes. So worth mentioning, because some guys will just be in college still when we look back at this.
So that's part of it. And that's maybe some of the risk. If a guy's got maybe a couple of extra years of eligibility and he's kind of a borderline guy, then that's some of the risk that's baked in with taking someone and predicting that he's going to be a first-round pick. And for me personally, some of this is based on my own evaluation. I did a version of this exercise before this year's draft even happened, so there wasn't the mocks that were out there, and there were mocks that how do I say this nicely? The mock drafts that had Nico Iamaleava and Nick Harbor were not the drafts that I took the most seriously. I'm going to say I know more than the people that did those mocks. That's condescending to say that.
It doesn't matter what happens between now and then. Hell or high water, do not let Andy Reid get Nick Harbor. I don't care what traffic altercations he's in. I don't care if he gets injured. The pick before him, Chicago Bears, draft him.
What have they done with speedy receivers? Can we ask that? Is that a fair question?
I think they found their Tyreek Hill, and then they kept trying to replace him, and it didn't go well. But I feel like this guy is a little bit bigger. So, yeah, no, I'm with you as far as the guys that we all think, because a lot of those guys are the mystery box, as they often say.
Yes. Look, there are some tough looks for the people that have to actually do this for a living, and I do feel sorry for them. I always bring up the example, Todd McShay. Way too early mock draft, 2016, Mitch Leidner, Minnesota quarterback. Todd said he watched multiple games. I think Todd just watched him play against Ohio State. That was one of those where I was like, this guy, I don't even think he's a top 10 quarterback in the Big Ten coming back. And that was interesting. But Todd obviously nails this more than not. But, all right, ultimate question. You want first pick or second two, Will?
For this one, locked and loaded first pick.
Oh. All right. Fire away.
Dun, 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 dun. A moment I've been waiting for since the other day. The New Orleans Saints select Arch Manning.
Wow.
Quarterback.
Okay.
Texas. The Manning family is celebrating. They're giving big hugs. While we are a poverty franchise, we are their poverty franchise. There will be no trade requested here. Our prodigal son is finally coming home after his uncles went 0 for 3 choosing LSU. No worries, we're not bitter here because the prodigal son has returned. He is going to rebuild the New Orleans Saints under Kellen Moore, who has gotten so frustrated with Tyler Shuck that he is currently wearing the Pierre the Saint costume. We have not had a quarterback controversy. Derek Carr is reviewing Lamborghinis with our money. Tyler Shuck is working at Publix. This is the quarterback of the future that I'm so excited for.
All right, so that's one guy that I didn't have on my board. No, just kidding. I have him on my board. I don't think Arch Manning's going to the NFL. Yep. I don't think he's going to the NFL in 2026. I'll be on record now. I'll be on record until I hear otherwise from the Manning camp. I wasn't going to take him. I wasn't going to take Arch, and I know that that's going to lose me this draft in the public opinion. Fully acknowledge that.
Connor, you've opened up for me the possibility here, which is the absolute funniest thing that can happen and why I'm now very scared of it, which is the Manning Passing Academy, the offseason after Arch does not go play for the Saints. in New Orleans. It's hot. He's there. All the Saints reporters are furious at him. I see it coming, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think he's going pro. I don't think he's going pro after 1 year as a starter. I don't and I realize that every mock draft in the world, you have to put in Arch Manning or you have to put in some sort of explanation. And I did like my 10 guys that I think will be SEC first rounders. Like that piece is up. You can read it on SaturdayDownSouth.com. Shameless plug. And I put at the very top, I said, guys, I think Arch is going to come back because the Mannings have played the long game at every stage of this. And I'm high on Arch. I think Arch is going to be awesome. All right. I think Texas deserves to start off number one in the country, all that stuff. But the fact is they decided, and I say they because I don't think this is necessarily a full-on Yamale Ava situation, but I do think he has family influence. We can admit that. Committed to a 5-7 program. Didn't transfer after his freshman season when Quinn Ewers announced he's coming back.
Look at that. We could be that 5-7 program here in New Orleans, right? Long-term vision is what you're buying here.
I love how you're trying to talk it into existence. Yeah, that's the most popular thing you can do in a mock draft is Saints number one overall, Arch Manning. But Eli, 3 seasons as a starter. Peyton, basically 4. Even Archie himself, 3 seasons as a starter. Even if Arch starts this full season for a team that goes to a national championship, he's going to have 18 or 19 starts in his career. NFL's kind of getting away from that. And I realized they would make an exception for Arch because whenever he decides to go, it's hard to not imagine him being in that conversation for number one overall pick. But at the same time, man, I just feel like at every stage they've told us we're playing the long game. We went to a situation in Texas to be with Steve Sarkisian and not just the fastest path to money in the NFL and all that stuff. I think he's going to come back, and I think NIL could definitely play a part in that, obviously. The report came out today. Texas, I think it was Kirk Bowles who had the report, like $35 to $40 million they're spending on that roster this year. Also, here's a question, Will, and we won't spend too much longer on Arch, but I don't know that we've ever seen someone – at number one overall in the way too early mocks that are a year out who hasn't been a full-time starter yet. I'm trying to think, man. I don't have any other examples that come to mind.
Joe Milton
was not number one of the early mocks. I don't even think Joe really showed up as much in those way too early first-round mocks as I thought he would. He was not universally in there. And Joe started at Michigan. So that's already – and he started – he had starts at Tennessee. He has starts at Tennessee in 21.
I guess 0 start. Yeah, because he has 0 starts, right? It's not one or two.
He has 2.
Okay.
He has 2, but we're talking about like at least having a month worth of starts.
Yeah. Anthony Richardson comes to mind, but I mean, nothing really got proven there. It's not like his.
Nah, he started the year before. He started, 4 games? Did he start 4 games the year before? And it wasn't number one overall. That's a key distinction as well.
Yeah. It's like there have been some weird mocks where guys it's almost clickbaity where it sounds crazy, but it's actually a good point. Yeah, it's like some of those guys have often had to actually play football and fallen off.
I just and no problem with you taking him 1 overall here. He's the obvious choice. I expect
it's a different situation. We've never seen anything like that. And to your point, he's had uncles who have kind of maneuvered themselves, right? And we talked about how Eli got to the Giants, but also Peyton picking his new team. They kind of not started
Eli picking his new team.
Well, no, I'm talking about Peyton whenever he went to the Broncos.
I thought you were talking about Eli getting out of the Chargers situation and go to the Giants. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But they took meetings. They were kind of thought leaders in that way where quarterbacks were seen as team first guys, and they were like, them and Elway were like, I don't know about this,
I just think he's going to play the long game. I really do. I think we get one more season of Arch in college football. So no problem with it being number one overall pick there, but I think it could miss just for that reason alone. All right. I will take the guy that I know if I don't get it. Oh, yeah, because I get 2 here. So definitely have to take him with my first pick. I'll take Garrett Nussmeier.
Saints fans are mad again. Look at this. They're right back off the bridge.
I'll take Nuss, and I realize the NFL has gotten away from the pocket passer, which that's going to be the comp for Nuss. Unless you're truly a tactician, it seems like you got to have at least some elements of mobility. I went back and looked at some of the numbers with him too. It was like 153 times that he was pressured last year. I think he only scrambled 7 times, which is pretty rare. I mean, Cam Ward, I don't think is a guy that is, necessarily prolific as a scrambler, a guy that I, throughout the pre-draft process called Brett Favre, not well, let me back up for a second. Not problematic Brett Favre. That's Cam Ward.
Okay.
Can't wait for that doc to come out. I'm sure it's going to be great. But the Garrett Nussmeier NFL arc is a little bit different probably than what it would have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I'm interested to see kind of if he gets picked apart for that. But I do still think someone that is going to have those multiple years as a starter, even if he kind of has some struggles this year, could be one of those guys that we're looking up going, I think you just have to take a guy like that, even if it's later in the first round. I think he could be a guy that comes off the board. People will love his background, love the offense that he played in, and I think he ends up being a first-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about Nuss on here. I don't want to go too overboard because then people call me a homer, but I think what Nuss has is one of those things, and I see it in Jalen Hurts, I see it in Joe Burrow, these coaches' sons that just work and get a little bit better every year. So while he was seen as kind of not an afterthought, but not like a 5-star quarterback coming out, I think he's made so much progress in that offense over the years that he's a very high floor pick. I like that a lot.
And as we talked about with Hester, maybe he could have been a first-round pick this year.
Yeah.
Maybe he could have been. We just didn't necessarily know because we didn't see him go through that process. All right.
Sorry, one more thing I just want to say, because now I'm thinking about this stuff. It almost might start to mirror baseball, where guys use their grades as leverage, and they end up coming back, but then their grades go down a little bit because they can't come back. Anyway.
Wait a minute. Explain that more.
So in baseball, it's better to get drafted after 3 years than 4 because you still have the leverage of coming back. So a lot of the times guys without eligibility have no leverage, and they can end up going pretty late in the draft because teams don't want to play their signing bonus. So same deal here. Obviously, the NFL is full of money. It's not like anyone's cheaping out here. But the threat of coming back to college might get guys paid going into their senior season, whereas guys that come out as seniors might be like more fallers in the future because they don't have that same leverage.
The only thing that's different is that in baseball, you can just not sign. Whereas in football, once you've declared for the draft, once you've hired an agent, once you've gone to the combine, like you're locked in.
Oh, yeah. I was talking about the grade, though, to be fair, like where it's like, hey, I got a 2nd-round grade, beat that offer. But you come back the next year, you're a 3rd-round grade, you can't come back. Gotcha.
Yeah. Leverage. Not something that Garrett Nussmeier is necessarily going to have, but obviously he's still set up for a lot of success. All right, second pick. I'm going with Anthony Hill Jr., Texas linebacker. Guy that doesn't play a premium position in terms of top-end value in today's NFL, but at the same time, man, everything that guy does, I would want as an anchor for an NFL defense. And he's going to be one of those guys that we're just going to look up in 10 years from now. He's going to be making big time plays in a playoff game, and you're not going to have to worry about it. I don't think I struggle with this comp because this guy is 4 inches shorter than him probably.
Okay.
But there's a lot of Nick Bolton with Anthony Hill Jr. There just is. And Nick Bolton is one of those guys now that we're looking up, and it's like, all right, that guy's just going to be on the Chiefs, and he's going to get to dominate, and he's going to get to play in all these Super Bowls. And like that's the type of player I think Anthony Hill Jr. could be after just an unbelievable start to his career at Texas. To be an inside linebacker, racking up 16.5 TFLs, forcing 4 fumbles, that's a really hard thing to do. And I just think you can't teach his instincts. And while I don't necessarily want to sit here and pretend like a bunch of guys at his position are going to come off the board in the first round, he's going to be viewed as one of those safety type picks, much how Tyler Booker went off the board much earlier than a lot of people expected, even though he's an interior offensive lineman. I think there were a lot of people that just looked at Tyler Booker and said, well, I'm just not going to have to worry about that. And I know that guy is going to do every right thing that from the day that he shows up. I think Anthony Hill Jr. is going to be one of those guys for Texas.
Yeah, to be honest, so far you have smoked me here because I clamored to get a guy you didn't want, and then you took my next 2 guys. So actually, this is the worst. Approach-wise, I might end up with my Joel Embiid here, right? But approach-wise, this is the worst draft I've had because you really baited me into. But I think it's a good bit with Arch anyway, and I didn't want to be faced with potentially taking Nussmeier, so that makes sense. So yeah, Hill Jr., I like him a lot. We've seen kind of the PK defense get its flowers kind of at all levels, honestly, at this point. But he's a guy who has been a vocal leader. He's been a guy who can, to your point, do it all. Yeah, they like a little bit of specialization. But again, I like the ability to play a couple of different roles because it gives you the high floor I've been talking about. So, yeah, he would have been my third guy as well. I love that pick.
And think about this, too. I always like looking at this with linebackers. When you have studs in front of you on the defensive line, your ability to pin your ears back, and especially a guy year 3 in the system as a starter, his ability to pin his ears back is going to be next level good. And he's going to make huge plays for that Texas defense. So I just don't necessarily see that floor unless he, suffers an injury. Obviously, all of these are barring significant late season injuries, but he's just one of those guys that I'll just be stunned if he falls out of those conversations.
Yes, absolutely. All right, on to me, number 4 overall pick. You should have seen this one coming a mile away because now I've just sold out for the cheese, for the empty calories here. We are going with our franchise tackle here. You heard it here first. Caden Proctor to protect Arch Manning. Now, I'm going to tell you why.
I love how you're drafting this like a team. You don't have to draft this like a team.
I know,
but I like
yeah.
that you are. It's kind of better. Maybe I should be doing that.
Well,
too.
this is now my All-Hopium team because I'm hoping that Arch doesn't go back to school. I'm hoping that Caden Proctor can be a little bit more than the Tinder bio he has been. Right? He's tall, he's strong, right? But I think that over the course of this offense of learning under the line coach for an additional year of maybe potentially going back to Iowa. No, I'm just kidding. I'm actually going to give this guy his flowers here. As far as a prototypical prospect, I think Caden Proctor there's a reason why he was graded as high as the number 2 overall prospect by 24/7. It is, again, his measurables and things you can and can't coach. And I think that Alabama offensive linemen, interior players often rise really high. I think he will get picked very high. And again, like I'm saying this positively, almost regardless of tape, because there's been a little bit of flux with the specifically, honestly, the offensive line in Alabama over the last couple of years. And I think this is a classic guy who could be seen as a little bit of a technique project. I talked about this with Will Campbell, honestly, where I was like, hey, I think he gets to the NFL, and he ended up in a great spot with the Patriots. But same deal here, a guy who has the tools, has the talents, has the physicality, and has the mentality from what we could tell, but just needs that little bit of cleaning up and has his best football ahead of him. So, yeah, I think he's going to be a great lineman on Sundays.
I knew I wasn't taking Caden Proctor.
Of course you did.
I had him on he's part of my list of 27, and Arches as well. So I should say you're still at 0 in that regard.
Yeah.
But he is one of those guys that and we've talked about him a lot. We talked about him with Cole as well. And he's somebody that's going to be a popular topic of conversation, maybe one of the more polarizing players in the SEC, both from a college standpoint, NFL, draft eval, all that stuff. But I do wonder if there's a little bit of the lazy evaluation of this guy was a 5-star recruit who started from the jump as a freshman. And so this is the path that you follow.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've actually sat down and watched him, while he's unbelievably athletic and Cole compared him to Evan Neal, he hasn't been that good yet.
Not good.
He hasn't been that good yet. And so so much of this is based on this progression. And as Cole brought up, he didn't get full reps in the spring because of the shoulder surgery. So that's another spring, just like last year with the Iowa mess, in which that guy's not getting on the field. And I think he needs to play more. Which is a weird thing to say about a guy entering year 3 as a starter.
Yeah.
But he needs to play more football, and he needs to play better football. So he's going to jump off the page, and maybe there's not a ton he could do that's going to hurt his first-round stock because I think offensive linemen are a little bit more isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think there's a chance that we go into this pre-draft process going, maybe he didn't have that best year. Maybe he couldn't stay healthy just yet, and what is he? Is he really going to be a tackle at the next level? Does he have the speed to be able to do that? Is he a little bit too sloppy? So I think there is some risk there. I do think there's definitely some risk, but I haven't seen a mock yet without Caden Proctor.
That's the thing.
Every one of them.
I am the apex of I'm 100% with you, but I think that he will end up going very high. So in retrospect, I think it's a good insulation, basically. Yep. Not retrospect, but that's why. Because at the end of the day, you never get fired as a GM for drafting Alabama players. You get drafted or you get fired for drafting guys at ETSU who don't pan out, right? So what often happens with these Bama guys, and specifically offensive linemen, is that they get drafted super high in the first round and they end up grading out the 3rd or 4th round players. Does that get you fired? Absolutely not. Okay. usually, like I'm used to where the Saints, where they graded with RAS, they got guys like Teron Armstead from like Arkansas Pine Bluff and stuff, right? Like that's off the board drafting. But if you, as a GM, you already have a top 4 pick here, you got to keep your job. Getting some big dude from Alabama that everybody knows his name as an offensive lineman, genius. And like I said, I think he does have the tools, and every GM and every coach is going to go, we're going to bring him in the building and turn his tape around.
Yep, you're exactly right. And he's a piece of clay. He will be viewed as a project, and who knows? Could be maybe his floor is one of those teams late in the first round is like, hey, you know what? It'd be great if we just could have this guy turn into a generational tackle, or even if he is more of a fit on the inside, and just roll the dice on somebody like that. So you're certainly right on the money with that. Mm-hmm. I'm getting the third guy on my board here with my third pick. I love me some Keldrick Falk, the Auburn edge rusher. Has done things through 2 years in that defense that make you go, whoa, how have we not talked about him even more? And it's probably because, let's be honest, Auburn hasn't been particularly good. But the things that
they always have like one guy.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Even in the 2020s, in which obviously it's been a really rough go for Auburn football overall, you're right. They've always just kind of had those, at least one of those guys. Mm-hmm. And Falk is showing up all over these mocks. And deservedly so, because he should be a preseason first-team All-SEC guy. And I think the size that he already has, 6'6", 270 as an edge rusher, projects really well. But the questions with him are going to be, all right, is he going to get the double-team treatment this year? Is he going to get the James Pierce sort of deal where all of a sudden it's like, man, if his sack numbers take a dip, what are we looking at here? His floor it might be a lot higher, though, because he improved a lot as a run defender. 23 run stops last year. He also did that with 45 pressures, and he did that with double-digit TFLs, too. And the biggest thing that's already working in his favor, he did his best against elite teams. Did his best against Bama, did his best against Georgia. Those 2 games alone, 4 combined TFLs, forced a fumble, had a fumble recovery. I think he's going to be one of those guys that – one of the first 3 edge rushers off the board feels really safe at a position that, let's be honest, if you've got the traits, you don't always need the numbers. And I think Falk is going to be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I love this pick. I actually had him about next. So again, just continuing to get cooked. But yeah, I think this is one of the rare ones where doing this for a living does tend to help you. But yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think that these guys go under notice, and like this is a good like sleeper guy where it's like he could have a great NFL career, he could go halfway through to like the Steelers or something, and you're like, oh my gosh, where was this guy? And the answer was Auburn, right? And like I said, plenty of people
never played on a team with a winning record. What? Like what? How did that happen?
This is unfortunately Auburn is turning into South Carolina, and South Carolina is turning into Auburn. Auburn used to have just a full front 7 of dudes you didn't want to guard. South Carolina would have one swamp monster that you were scared of and could just kind of block him and wait till they got to the NFL and be scared of him. Now it's like, no, it's completely reversed, right? And I think that, yeah, if you see on tape that guys are tired because their roster is thin and they're getting, all these points around about them because their quarterback, obviously their offense isn't moving, then they tend to look out of shape. But when you see what he's done, to your point, if people were watching the draft on kind of like a boomer level, they still would have seen his plays. So I think that he has, other than, staying healthy, being consistent, there's a lot to like and not a ton of questions.
There's no better way to get on our radar than doing ridiculous things as an underclassman in the SEC. Mm-hmm. He's already checked that box. He should be on everybody's radar going into 2025.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm between 2 guys here. I'm going to not do the hope box here, okay? But there's a guy, I've said his name a couple of ways. Is it Suntarine Perkins?
Suntarine Perkins.
Suntarine. Okay, yes. So
no relation to Harold, by the way.
Right.
Despite the similarities that one can see in their measurables and the positions that they play.
Yes, exactly. And I think the difference being we haven't had all of the extra discussion around this Perkins, right? And so point being, I think that he's already fit into his role. I think that Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss do a great job showcasing guys, especially like for the next level. In these last couple of classes, the way that they've set their guys up for success as far as not like Lane is a marketer at the end of the day. And I think that Perkins has played such a key role on this defense over, his first couple of years. He was like one of those rotational guys as a freshman, came in last year and was really solid.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the thing is like it's hard to rank the guys they had because they, again, had lots of swamp monsters, but he was almost like the unheralded guy because he committed to Ole Miss. You know, we kind of went the old school pipeline route. And so I think that they, like, as far as marketing, as far as the graphics and stuff, he kind of almost flew under the radar for the guys they were promoting. But I think this is going to be his year to kind of lead the Ole Miss defense. And I think that Ole Miss is going to be, I mean, say what you will about Lane, but he's kept a floor on that thing, man. I know I keep saying floor, but they're going to win a big game or two a year. They're going to make some games close, and I think they have their identity. And so it's just kind of rolling forward what we saw in Ole Miss this year.
Handful of games last year in which he was the best player on that field, which is saying a lot with the defense that had dudes get drafted and was one of the best units in all of college football. He led them with 14 TFLs, tied Princely Umanmielen with 10.5 sacks. His issue could be size because very similar to Harold Perkins Jr., you're playing that edge position. People are like, hey, you're like 210, 220. Like, you're going to be able to put on weight and do this. But, man, he played with his hair on fire. He really did. He is returning from offseason shoulder surgery. So that's going to be kind of a question with him. Hasn't been as frequent in these mocks, but I had him at 10 on my board. I think he absolutely could be a first-round pick and someone that we're all of a sudden talking about as, wow, he's taking over even more games. And maybe the talent that he had around him at times last year made him, one of those guys where you weren't always looking at him on the top of the scouting report, but he's definitely somebody that is going to be talked about, I think, a lot this year. So I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, and really quick on him, I actually just missed the fact or forgot the fact that he was actually a bona fide legit 5-star too. Yeah. So like I said, in the transfer portal world, the concept of how we view talent is so different, where it's like, hey, it's been seen as a while. They just could not get 5-stars since, I mean, forever without, doing some stuff that was a little bit off the books, right? And so the fact that they were able to get him, retain him, and exactly to your point, the versatility he brings, the fact that the focus was on other guys, I think putting him in kind of not the literal star role a la Harold Perkins, but like a star role of his defense, where it's not like, you got these big guys up front, it's easy. It's like, no, we're going to be able to show off all that you could do because you're going to need to plug those holes as a leader this year.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stick with the defensive front seven theme that we've kind of gone on here. I'm going to go with LT Overton.
There's just no way you've taken everybody I wanted next. There's just no way. And I said, I'm not going to take the mystery box this time, but I'm sure you have some stat on this gentleman that's like, you don't understand. He's been in the pyramids of Gaza picking up rocks for 2 years. It's been crazy. Go ahead.
No, the LT Overton thing is kind of weird because he doesn't have the stats. He's got loud plays. Plays. He plays that position at the edge at 280 where you can do a lot of different things with him. I'm not sure if they're going to do the pre-draft thing like they did with Nick Scorton, where all of a sudden you're like, hey, you want to lose 20 pounds and see if you could play this position a little bit faster? I don't know what his future holds, but you can do a lot with that. And you don't necessarily need some 15-sack season to be in that conversation. He plays that bandit role, which is a bit of a hybrid in that Bama defense with what they like to do, with what Kane Womack likes to do. And look, you're seeing him all over these preseason All-America teams because his plays are so loud. They're so loud. And you only need a few of those if you're doing those things, if you're not considered a liability in run defense as well, and you play your part there, you're willing to take on double teams, which he's playing a bit more on the edge than he is on the interior. But still, I think he's going to be one of those guys that people look at and say, well, we could use him in a lot of different ways. And I like that. I like that he feels like if he's part of a really good Bama defense, which has talented pieces coming back, then he should be set up to have those splash plays. And all of a sudden we're like, dang, LT Overton, what is he, like number 22? Number 22 in Crimson. That guy's making another big-time play. So I think he's a guy that's going to be very frequently in these mocks throughout the season, even if his season doesn't end with double-digit TFLs.
Yeah, and I think this is a perfect place to get the mystery box because we talked about kind of his legendary recruiting ranking, the story that's come around him. And again, when you watch him with your eyeballs, you see it. It's not like some, we talked about Proctor kind of being up on a shelf, or you see his PFF numbers, or you see his individual plays. With this gentleman, it's like, why are they hiding you? What is going on in there? You can't just be back there scaring people like that. You need to play more so I can see how regular this is. So yeah, I think that, again, another guy that is a lump of clay, and I think he fits well in college. It's not like he's an NFL-style player because that type of dude works at any level. But I'm actually just really excited to watch him this year. I think that's just my takeaway.
Bam's got a lot of those guys. Could be 3, maybe 4 of those defensive players coming off the board in the first round next year, and it wouldn't necessarily be surprised. I don't want to tip any picks, but there could be no shortage of guys coming out of that Kane-Wommack defense, just as you predicted.
Yeah, man. All right, on to listen. Bama having defensive talent. Watch out, everybody. Anyways, no, they'll be sorry. Anyway, so okay, I'm gonna go with at least a fun one because I don't want to also just draft all like interior guys. I'm gonna go with the ultimate mystery box, and you know what? I'm gonna go with a level of positivity here because this one's just about health. Nick Anderson from the LSU Tigers. I had to get one of my guys. I think he is the prototypical style of wide receiver that NFL teams look for. You know, he's big. He's still technically growing, and I think he's shown the speed. He's shown like the multi-sport athleticism. He's a track background. He's 6'4". He's not like he's carrying bad weight. You know, he still has like some good weight to put on. And I say all that to say, again, watch this gentleman's tape, right? This is a guy that with a healthy year, I think at any level, we kind of saw him for his single healthy year, his freshman year, right? And it was
redshirt freshman year, but yeah.
Right. And it's a lot to write home about. And if you had, it's one of those players where if you had told me during his redshirt freshman year, hey, you're going to be able to draft him this late, you would have gone, oh my gosh, I'll take that, right? And you're so right because he actually had eligibility. Like he played a little bit his freshman year and then came back. So yeah, he got the red shirt, but also played basically. So anyway, so point being, yeah, he's had one healthy year, right? And last year he famously had one game. It was just kind of a one and done situation for him, and the Oklahoma offense suffered. So he's the classic guy that we, like I said, have kept up in the back. It's not like he's had really any problems other than health. It's not like it's been like he came out and looked slow, but in this offense, right, we've seen LSU produce ridiculous wide receivers. We saw late Kyron Lacy and obviously
name one, Will. Name one.
I would love to name every LSU wide receiver, but we don't have that much time. I mean, all pros they've had, the Pro Bowlers. But point being, you could see in that offense the talent level went down. And, you know, Kyron Lacy, again, respect to him. We were talking about two guys that were probably the two best receivers taken in the draft before, two guys in BTJ and Blake Neighbors who were in conversation for Rookie of the Year. And the offense fell off a little bit, but that was mainly because of Jaden Daniels in the run game. The pass game stayed about where it was, and in terms of yardage, went up, right, statistically. So point being, you're going to have the targets. You're going to have a quarterback who's going to get you in a position. You have the measurables. You have the speed. I think health is the only X factor. And considering that we're predicting this far in the future, I know it's Nick Anderson. I get it. You know, I have often rooted for hurt athletes to get better magically, and it hadn't worked out. You know, we've all done that. But I think this is the type of guy that makes an NFL guy kind of salivate, where it goes, wow, he could do it all if he just stays healthy.
It's a fun pick. It is a fun pick. All Bang the Drum team member last year, unfortunately, as you mentioned, just a lost season. If you were wearing a jersey as an Oklahoma receiver, you got hurt and you just couldn't play football. But he is one of those guys that I'm interested to see how much they change up his looks pre-snap. I don't think he's going to play a ton in the slot because Aaron Anderson is there and he does obviously so much of his damage out of the slot. They'd like to be able to get Barryon Brown in some of those spots as well after he came over from Kentucky.
He's too big to play in the slot, especially with those two other guys. It's like, dude, you're just asking for an ACL tear there with all those quick cuts.
But I think he can. That's the thing is I think he can. I think they'd like to use him in some of those areas because he's not a big time. As much as he is a big play guy, he was the only power conference guy, I believe, in 23 that averaged at least 20 yards per catch with double-digit receiving touchdowns. It's a good stat. It's a really good stat. And obviously Texas fans know all too well about what Nick Anderson can do if he's unaccounted for. But he can improve as a contested catch guy. That's the thing that he can get better at. That I wonder if sometimes there will be games in which LSU says, we're going to move him to the slot to get him going. And he could become one of those guys. Now, Justin Jefferson didn't necessarily profile as a typical slot guy. And they moved him into the slot all the time, and he obviously did ridiculous things. A different era of LSU football, I understand what we're talking about, but I want to see if they're able to utilize him more so in that way and showcase him and say this is the next great one, because that's probably why they went out and got somebody that has his size and his skill set. But I'm super intrigued by Nick Anderson. Huge bounce back year could be in store, and obviously playing in that offense, you're always capable of going off.
Yeah, I just say, like, from the standpoint of with those other two guys, like, my favorite picture of Aaron Anderson is the one where he's shaking hands with Nick Saban and cleats and Saban's looking down at him.
Right. He's 5'8", dude. I know a 5'8" guy when I see one. That's a 5'8" guy.
Yeah, he's like little to be as good as he is. So like point being, like you really can't put a guy like that outside, you know? And like LSU did it kind of to a degree, but same thing with Barry. He's a little bit bigger, right? But he's still not an outside receiver that could win in the SEC. So it's kind of by de facto, it's like, yeah, Dick Henderson, you could do all this stuff, but you're the only one who can do this, so you have to do this. And to your, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Contested catches, I think, is something he needs to improve on. This is not a comp. I'm not saying he's this level of player, but his kind of roboticness in a way reminds me of Michael Thomas, how he just looks like an assassin. And it's like, okay, like it's as if it's just him and the ball, and he's like an AI program that's designed to catch it as efficiently as possible. He's not really like handing it up or anything. He's not really like out there trying to like, you know, get all the swag going. Like he just feels like a robot playing football. And so to your point, a player like that has to be able to get contested catches, because that was the Mike Thomas special, right? If you can't do that and you're that size and you don't have 4.3 track speed, you got to win 101.
Which I think that could happen. More reps. Guys playing, as you said, like basically this is like a second full season as a starter. So I think that he could be in those conversations by season's end. I'm getting the number 5 guy on my board.
Okay.
This is who I'm ending with here. And I love that he fell to me. It's a bit of a risk. And there's a ton of different ways that you can go with this. I don't want to tip picks. We'll do like an honorable mention and stuff afterwards here, because obviously there are probably people shouting names into their phones right now. I'm going with a guy that's not even healthy, and I'm not entirely sure he's going to be healthy for the start of the season, but give me Jermod McCoy.
Okay.
Give me Jermod McCoy, even though he's coming off of the torn ACL that he suffered, unfortunately, training in Texas in January. Just not a good offseason it's been for Tennessee to have their stud All-American corner suffer that preseason injury. Hopefully he subscribes to the Will Muschamp timetable of return from a torn ACL.
Okay.
Which is roughly like 4 months according to Will Muschamp. But yeah, when this guy is healthy and on the field, don't let the Jeremiah Smith stuff fool you. Okay, he's so
that'll fool all of us. Then that's the case. Who's locking that guy down? Yeah.
For 2 weeks after that game, I had to say in a variety of places, look, we saw it was a mistake to try and put Jermod McCoy in single coverage on Jeremiah Smith. And we can all use hindsight to say might not have been the best idea. Not all those touchdowns were against it, but I actually kind of understood where Tennessee was coming from. I kind of understood it because of how locked down he had been, how ball savvy he is, especially near, the red zone in those big time situations, and just someone that has been a huge transfer addition, kind of one of these casualties of the Pac-12 coming over from Oregon State, a guy that at this time last year was not talking about whatsoever. But just think, if he's able to make a full return in that defense that, Tim Banks has been doing a really good job of being able to get these NFL guys, kind of cranked out here. I just think he's got a ton of potential. Defended 13 passes last year, 9 PBUs, 4 interceptions, semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award. Should be all over these preseason All-America lists, if not for the injury. And maybe he's going to get the treatment where teams are just going to kind of avoid whoever he's matched up against, and that could happen as well. But, man, just be hard-pressed to find too many defensive backs better than him in college football. I just think Jermod McCoy, unfortunately, the last 2 things that we're talking about with the way his season ended and the way his offseason started are bad things, but everything else is good.
Yeah, it's funny, right? And I often talk about how NFL guys view college guys, and it's like, it's not the stuff that we see, like the joke about like he doesn't have that dog in him. It's not that stuff. It's stuff like this where it's like, oh yeah, a guy got hurt. Like, is your favorite player ever gotten hurt? And it's like, it's funny, like what, like the result can be the same, the stimulus could be the same, but the logic could be completely different. And for us, it's like, he got toasted by that guy. And at the NFL, it's like, injury. So like, point being, I don't think that stuff really matters at kind of in either direction. I think, like, exactly to your point, it's like Tennessee obviously felt like they could win, send a little bit of pressure. We all know how that went, right? So at the end of the day, he's not his own coach, and he's certainly not going to go, hey, take me out. I'm getting cooked out here, right? You can't have that. And so he was kind of just left on an island against a guy that nobody could cover last year when it mattered. And the other side of that, I mean, I love drafting injured players because you get so much value there. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, it's not to say Jeremiah Smith didn't have down games. Obviously, Texas did a whale of a job, but we're talking about bracket coverage as opposed to
right.
The
one-on-one old school cat defense is not something you want to do against him.
If your coach asks you to be in one-on-one coverage against Jeremiah Smith, you should be able to say, all right, then turn off the cameras. We're not going to use this on NFL draft film. This video does not exist. We're going to bury it. We're going to do whatever football guys do with bad film and just pretend that it does not exist because it's simply not fair.
And just to be clear, the reason I said when it mattered is when it mattered that Texas game he was there that one time.
Well, yeah, the Texas game, not so much. We're talking about the Notre Dame game. He definitely was.
Yeah. I'm saying like in terms of like big catches and stuff. Like I feel like he had a big one. But anyway.
Last pick, Will. Who you got?
Okay, so I'm going to fully just insulate myself. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to get somebody that, again, I'm not getting fired. I know it's not one team, but as the GM of this team selecting this pick, I think this is the most easy, set and forget it guy. It's going to be Parker Brailsford. Interior, exterior offensive lineman, do it all. He's played a little bit of everywhere, right? He's the guy who came over from Washington with DeBoer, his favorite son. He's going to give great interviews with him, obviously, because of that. And again, like Alabama's offensive line, I'm banking on an Alabama offensive line renaissance, right? I'm betting on Alabama basically restarting. Again, me and you talked about this with Bryce Young. I'm sure other people were, but I feel like we really like bang the drum here where it was like, yeah, Alabama's kind of letting Bryce Young down. Like their offensive line's not great. After that 1 year, you know, the high of the receivers weren't great. And so they actually kind of have a rebuild job at Alabama, which nobody wants to hear about. Similar to like when Belichick left the Patriots, it's like, yeah, I kind of just ended up without these exact like the advantages that I had in the middle of my career. And this is the main one. It's offensive line. And we've seen that with Caden Proctor not exactly getting healthy. But I say all of that to say Brailsford has been the one port in the storm. He's been the one guy that feels pretty consistent. He's been the guy that has been the steadying force. And so I think with an additional year under his belt and the story of the Alabama offensive line, I'm sure the PFF numbers will come out and they'll be better. And it'll be this renaissance of the Alabama offensive line. And those two guys will be kind of the two captains. Again, Brailsford's a guy who's already seen. You can do it at the highest level, even with Jalen Milroe. Again, he doesn't have tackle film, so it's a lot harder to blame things like sacks and holding onto the ball too long for him. So, yeah, I think that he's going to be a very useful player to the next level. Landon Dickerson, the one that's with the Eagles, very similar. So, yeah.
Didn't have him on my 27. Didn't have him. Know the Parker Brailsford story well. Talked about it a lot last year. Thought that was going to be a huge positive to kind of stabilize that offensive line.
It wasn't good last year. Yeah. It was not good last year. I'm not telling you it was. Me of all people, I'm not. But I think that this upcoming year, they're going to have to figure it out.
Be interested to see if he projects as a center, if they want to move him to one of those guard spots at the next level. Maybe he'll go into the combine saying that he can do both. But yeah, he's 2/5 of your board is Alabama offensive line. I'm surprised. I'm surprised.
Oh, yeah, because that's what you got to do. You got to take the safe guys, which is Alabama offensive line. They never get you fired. And then you go get the fun guys. That was the goal there.
Okay, so just to recap before we do some honorable mention, your board, Arch Manning, Caden Proctor, Centarian Perkins, Nick Anderson, Parker Brailsford. My board, Garrett Nussmeier, Anthony Hill Jr., Keldrick Falk, LT Overton, and Jamad McCoy.
Yeah, you probably smoked me there, I'll be honest. But
I think you're going to win the popular vote.
I wanted the catharsis of saying Arch Manning to the Saints. I'll be honest. If I had that to you ever again, I wouldn't, because then you immediately told me it wasn't going to happen, and I would just feel, like I said, I'm now just counting down to the Manning Passing Academy, where he's just sitting there yucking it up with Eli. We've drafted someone who's not Nussmeier, and I'm sitting here going, how did I get here?
Maybe the Saints could be bad for 2 years.
Maybe, buddy. Maybe. Hopefully, at this point.
Who knows? All right, let's do some of the honorable mentions here, because there's a ton of guys here that I bet people will be surprised to not see some of these guys on the board. Caden Green is one of these, interior offensive linemen who you just look at and go, I'd be surprised if that guy doesn't have that first round type floor, late first round floor, even though he is an interior offensive lineman, the former Oklahoma transfer. His teammate Connor Tollison is going to be someone that people are talking about, maybe the first center off the board. Jake Slaughter, another center coming over, who'd be coming through from Florida. Florida trenches look a lot better this year.
See, I was at the end. I was between those two, actually, and I thought, would I rather talk nice about this guy or Brailsford, because they're similar, but yeah.
Florida's offensive line is going to be really good this year. It should be really, really good. Lenore Sellers. How about Lenore Sellers? I'll be honest. I would have had him in my top 5 on my board if not for that stigma that exists with South Carolina quarterbacks, man.
Is that what did it? I thought you were going to say Mike Shula.
No, it's part of it. It could be a concern. I think Lenore Sellers has room to improve as a passer in the intermediate.
Yeah.
I think Nick Harbor taking that next step would be really important for him. The turnover worthy plays have got to cut down with him. I love Lenore Sellers. I switched him into number 2 on my post-spring SEC quarterback rankings just because of the DJ Lagway shoulder stuff. I moved Lagway to 3. But yeah, I mean, Sellers being a first-round pick would not be surprising at all. CJ Allen?
Hold on really quick. This is not a troll because I thought you were going to hit me with this and you might have had a point, which is if Dowell Loggins had stayed, do you think he goes, top 5?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be talking about that a lot more.
Yeah.
I do. And who knows? Maybe the year that Mike Shula spent as an analyst was a year. It was at least a year that he spent as an analyst at South Carolina. Maybe all of a sudden that won't tank his draft stock. I don't know. I do know that Lenore Sellers checks so many boxes. So many. And you could also look at some of the surroundings and wonder how much of that he had to work through. Because it's not going to be a world beater offensive line this year. It wasn't a world beater offensive line last year. One of the worst SEC receiver rooms it was last year. They got the kid coming over from Utah State to replace Rocket Sanders at running back, which will be interesting. But I thought they were going to be more active in the portal with getting receivers. They didn't necessarily do that. So yeah, look, it's I don't want to assume that Lenore Sellers is a lock for a first round pick. And especially if he decides, look, I can come back next year. He had the red shirt his first year, so he's only used up 1 year of eligibility. He will have some of that leverage. So I just thought there was a little bit too many moving pieces for me to put him in my top 5.
Yeah, I thought about really trying to break your brain and taking CJ Baxter, so you had to advocate against it. Because what if he stayed?
CJ Baxter in one mock, and I was like, dang, I got to get back on. Back on because look, he's going to be in the timeshare situation. Trey Wisner is the only 1,000-yard back returning in the SEC. If we're just talking about what they did in the SEC last year, not like someone like Jade Knott, who was a former 1,000-yard back but didn't do so in the SEC. I do love me some CJ Baxter, and I love a Steve Sarkisian back. I really, really do. And I saw him in one mock, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to be the one that's highest on him. So I thought about something like that, but didn't quite pull the trigger. But
listen, not wrong, just early. Not wrong, just early. We have to see him play healthy before we know.
We don't really talk a lot of Georgia guys, Will. Like CJ Allen's the one. I had CJ Allen in my top 10. Yeah. I think Christian Miller's one that you're going to be seeing in mocks. Dalen Everett, he's got to put together a bit more consistency and not just beat up on Texas like so many of those Georgia defensive players did last year. But Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks, I'm actually kind of surprised to see Caleb Banks in some of these mocks as like a fifth-year guy who could have, like if he was going to be a first-round pick, why didn't he just go last year? But you hit on something before with Nick Anderson that I'll be interested to see. Will one of these transfer receivers in the SEC be a first-round pick? Because the group is really good. Between Nick Anderson, Eric Singleton, who people are really high on him, the Georgia Tech transfer coming over to Auburn, and that's a big part of why we're talking about this Auburn receiving room being potentially historic. Deion Burks, kind of in the camp of Nick Anderson, except he stayed at Oklahoma. And then Zachariah Branch, who, look, preseason All-American at this time last year. Is he all of a sudden going to turn into the player we thought he was going to be, or the player that he looked like he was as a true freshman at USC? And then, so there are all those guys. And then what about Harold Perkins Jr.?
What about him, man? I think 3 of those 4 guys you just listed have already burned me once because Branch I took it way too early Heisman. So I'm already, if you've done it once in my mind, unless it's like a guy who gets injured or something, I'm like, eh. Yeah. And I think there's just too much. Like I said, it's like Perkins is thinking too much. Like I would rather him be Sontaran Perkins where he's had his role and people haven't been like staring at him, because I've learned more about the star position, Connor, than I've ever wanted to know in my life since Harold Perkins has been on my team. And I think that's the issue, is that it's too much now. Like it's he's too overhyped.
I don't think he should be in those conversations. I only saw him, I think, in one of the mocks that I looked at, which is probably about fair. Worth mentioning, if we were doing this for future first-round picks and not just for 2026, it would have been an entirely different draft, because I think Ryan Williams, Colin Simmons, Dylan Stewart, Cam Coleman, I think all those guys would have been picked. I think they all would have probably come off the board. That would have been half of our draft. So it is kind of unique in that maybe some of the most obvious picks for future first rounders aren't even draft eligible yet.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm with you because I wanted a receiver just to like kind of see who is out there. But to your point,
for your team.
Yes, exactly. For my made up team or for whatever. But I wanted to kind of like see who the best receiver was. And it's like, but I found myself, it's like Singleton. Okay. So do I really know enough about him to where I could feel good about picking him? And then also him X the Auburn offense at this point. It's like find myself rooting for a guy that I really haven't seen play a ton on a team that last time we saw them didn't look great. And yeah,
And real quick, Auburn's last first-round receiver in the real
Yep.
NFL draft, Terry Beasley, a half century ago.
Yep, exactly. So it's like, do I really want to push uphill for some of this stuff? It was similar to like kind of like the Florida thing, but yeah, it's interesting because to your point, it's like we have some younger guys, we have some transfer guys. There aren't a ton like the Oklahoma guy you mentioned, Burks, is like that are just chilling. They're just coming back, everything's normal, you know. So it's kind of a weird class, but someone will always separate themselves. You know?
Agreed. That was fun.
Yeah,
that was fun. Maybe we're gonna have to do that every single year. It's just so many different ways you can go with this. I think we just simply have to go who the winner of this in the, a year from now is just simply who has the most correct, not like who goes the highest or something like that.
It's really because I bet three, let's call it 1 to 4 of these guys, even maybe to 5, especially the amount of bigger money guys on here. They might just not even be in the NFL, and then you just lose. Like if I hit 3 great guys or 2 great guys, then 3 great guys aren't in the NFL. That's an L. You know what I'm saying?
2 should be the expectation. You should get at least 2 if you're doing this exercise. 1 would be considered a real disappointment. You probably really messed this draft up. 3 would be like, all right, that's solid. I feel pretty good about. 4 is I absolutely nailed this, and 5 is go buy a lottery ticket.
Yep,
that's the level.
Deion Sanders calling your iPhone.
Seriously. Yeah, way too soon to talk about Sanders receiving phone calls. Way too soon. All right, let's kick it to Barry Tramel. If you know Oklahoma, know the Big 12, you've been following for a while, you know Barry Tramel. He is super, super plugged in, one of the most respected people in this business. So great stuff with him. Here is Barry Tramel. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is a first-time guest, in fact. It is the Tulsa World's Barry Tramel. Barry, I've got a lot of Oklahoma things that I want to get to with you, but I've got to start with the story of how we met, and I promise it'll have a much better ending than How I Met Your Mother. No spoiler alerts there, but last year at SEC Media Days, you came up to me, and I was kind of blown away when you told me that you had been listening to the show just to learn more about the SEC. So instead of asking you what you've learned from this show, which probably pretty minimal, like we don't really, we just kind of throw around a bunch of takes on here. But what have you learned about the SEC since Oklahoma joined the conference a year ago?
Oh, thousands of things. Nothing major. I think the SEC is as it was billed. We were told the venues are going to be great. I figured they were. Been to. I went to Ole Miss, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, Auburn, and Missouri last season. So, told the football was great. I knew that already. What's been the most pleasant surprise to me is how not just efficient and professional, but friendly and helpful the SEC office is.
Agreed.
And that's not the Big 12 is really good too. Got a lot of friends down there, but for such a powerful and influential organization as the SEC, from Greg Sankey on down, everybody's just really easy to deal with. It's a little bit of a throwback, to be honest with you, and I was not expecting that. And that's just been a very pleasant thing. If I need something, I can call. I can call the SEC office. It almost always gets taken care of with helping me with whatever. And it's not the button down, professional, I was thinking it would be more like the NFL or the NBA or something. And it's really, really a bunch of helpful people. So that's just been it's been a great thing for me.
Something to be said for that. It doesn't, and I came in this, like you, as an outsider and somebody that quickly had to learn the ways of the conference. And for a league that has been so dominant that so many people want to talk about, I've never, ever gotten the sense that the conference is elitist to those who cover it. Now, there's definitely a different perception when Greg Sankey gets up to the microphone and talks about wanting more bids for the SEC and the NCAA tournament and stuff like that. But you're right. There is something to be said for how inclusive the SEC feels. It never feels like it's getting to that place where it just wants to, turn its nose up to everyone and everything. It is. I couldn't agree with that more. I think it's extremely welcoming. It probably hasn't felt very welcoming for Oklahoma, though. Like that's the tough part is that, man, how humbling of a year that was. How many OU fans do you think had to do a quick 180 on all things SEC after seeing what it was like and what a down year in this conference looks like?
Well, yeah, the Sooners have the unfortunate timing of being on sort of a down cycle when they entered the SEC. And I think most fans realize that. The Oklahoma's, proud program, high opinion of itself, demands excellence, high expectations, all those things. But the last 3 years before entering the SEC were not golden years for Oklahoma. They had a 6-7 season in 2022 in the Big 12. So, um, I think they sort of knew that it was going to be a rocky climb in year one, and we'll see about year two. So it's just bad timing. If OU had joined the SEC in 2017 when Bob Stoops handed over that great team to Lincoln Riley, well then here they come with guns a-blazing. But the talent level is not what it needs to be. You look at the NFL draft; they had two guys drafted Saturday or Thursday through Saturday. Um, the identity is taking a hit. They're making the transition from the great offense to playing a lot more defense. It's gone okay on the defensive end. Brent's doing a great job with the defense. The offense has not been up to speed. So those kinds of things. I think people sort of knew this was in the offering. I don't know that they expected 6-7, but they knew that, hey, they probably going to be a little bit before they make it to Atlanta for an SEC championship game.
Barry, you wrote about something that deserved more national discussion than it probably got. Oklahoma letting Dillon Gabriel move on was one of the biggest missteps that's kind of defined the 2024 season. What would OU's season have looked like if Gabriel had stayed instead of transferring to Oregon?
Well, they would have won more games. Now, one quarterback's not going to get you 5 more wins, I don't think. But everybody saw the ineptitude of the OU offense. There were times when it got a little bit acceptable, but for most of this season, the offense was terrible, historically bad. That was not all Jackson Arnold's fault or Michael Hawkins in his 3 starts. It wasn't necessarily all their fault. We had, we had all kinds of chronicles of the offensive ineptitude. New coordinator Seth Luttrell just wasn't up to speed. Offensive line was a disaster. The injuries racked up extensively on the receivers. But what I took from the whole thing is I think it was a major learning experience for Brent as a head coach. I think he is so defensive focused that I really think he just sort of didn't prioritize offense in the way that a head coach has to. And, we've seen, Lincoln Riley sort of got labeled with the same thing, only opposite. But Lincoln's, Lincoln never had a decision to make, like, who's going to quarterback your defense. That's the quarterback of an offense is, it's the most important position in sports. And I just think Brent sort of just blew it off and said, it doesn't, Jackson Arnold's a good prospect. He's good. He's going to, he won't cost as much money. And we've got him for 2 or 3 more years. We'll just go with him. Massive mistake. When you've got a quarterback like Dillon Gabriel who's willing to stay for the going rate, he wasn't holding OU hostage for $3 or $4 million a year. You sign him up and say, thanks, Dillon. 3 years with you at quarterback. We're blessed. And they let him go and they paid the price. I think the good news is I think Brent realizes what he did and realized, hey, we got to have a quarterback. So it was a tough lesson to learn, but clearly, the Sooners paid the price for that in what you saw with that Oklahoma offense all season.
It's an important caveat to remember that too, is that Gabriel was willing to stay, and it is a situation which OU moved on from him, and they made this decision. Look, 1 year of Dillon Gabriel versus potentially the next 3 years of Jackson Arnold. Let's go with the latter, and let's go with the guy that we recruited. And I think Gabriel's going to be a really interesting case study for guys to max out their eligibility and to find the right home, because for that guy to get picked in the 3rd round as a sub 6 foot 24-year-old quarterback, to me, that only happens if he follows Bo Nix's footsteps at Oregon. It doesn't happen if he stays at Oklahoma, but there is going to be something to be said for that. I've talked ad nauseum about why it didn't work out for Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. We're just talking about all the different factors, the offensive line, the new look offensive line, the receivers going down like flies. I mean, it was just everything that could go wrong did go wrong for that Oklahoma offense. And it was different than the Spencer Rattler situation because that felt like he was more responsible for some of his undoing, even though it was, different with the quarterbacks before him. But what did you make of Jackson Arnold's time in Norman from start to finish, of like the guy that came in so decorated from the state of Texas into the moment he left? Like, how should we talk about his time in Norman?
Well, Jackson Arnold, I think, is also a guy that's, we talk about OU's timing entering the SEC. Jackson Arnold is a clear example of a guy who wasn't ready for that moment and that responsibility. And 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, no doubt, he would never have been asked to. But this day and age, Kansas State coach Chris Kleiman told me this early last season. They let Will Howard go to Ohio State. They kept Avery Johnson, and K-State's happy. They're happy for Will Howard won the national title. K-State loves Avery Johnson. It worked out. They made the same decision Oklahoma did. It just worked out. But Chris Kleiman said, you can only pay one quarterback. And we chose to pay Avery Johnson. And this day and age, you can only pay one quarterback. And even if it's just his second year on campus, he's got to be ready. If you're paying him, he's got to be ready to play. And it's just clear that, Jackson Arnold wasn't ready. Maybe in year 3 down in Auburn, maybe this is the time. We look at, here at Oklahoma, everybody's measured by Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray became the OU starting quarterback in his 4th year in college. Baker Mayfield became the Oklahoma starting quarterback in his 3rd year of college. And now guys get thrown in. Bryce Underwood at Michigan's a good example. He's going to get baptized. Texas has been able to sort of bring Arch Manning along. We'll see how Arch does, but asking guys to play before they're ready can be troublesome. And I think that's what happened with Jackson Arnold. He played just a fraction of his freshman year, played the bowl game against Arizona, and threw 3 interceptions, played okay otherwise, but that's a Mrs. Lincoln deal. So I just think he wasn't ready for the moment. And in a previous time, in a previous place, he wouldn't have been asked to be in that moment, but now he is. So just unfortunate timing. He clearly was a great high school player, clearly a 5-star, all those things. Oklahoma bet a little bit too much on that recruiting stock, though, and it cost them.
How do you think it's going to play out for Jackson Arnold at Auburn?
Well, I think a couple of questions. Is he damaged by that season at Oklahoma? Because he got gun shy quick. Oklahoma took him out of that Tennessee game. If you remember, he got benched right before halftime at Tennessee when he just sort of lost his head and was doing things that weren't even it wasn't a misread or a poor decision. He was just doing crazy things. And Brent Venables was so alarmed, he took him out of the game and didn't put him back in for 3 or 4 weeks. So can he learn from that? When he came back, he was better. He still wasn't great. The game at Missouri was a total disaster, losing the game in the last seconds with a careless fumble, a scoop and score by Mizzou to win the game. It's not acceptable at this level of football. So has he been damaged by that? I don't have any idea. Hugh Freeze is certainly a coach that knows what he's doing. He can reclimate, I think, Jackson Arnold. I just don't know if he will, but he's got the tools. People love his tools. Now he's got some experience. It's rough experience, but we'll see. Auburn, of course, had a interesting football team. Peyton Thorne was a pretty good quarterback, except he'd throw the ball to the other team on occasion. Jackson Arnold's sort of the same thing in Norman last year.
The thing I always find fascinating about the Oklahoma quarterback situation is that as great as it's been in the 21st century, the last Oklahoma starting quarterback who started and finished his career in Norman It's Landry Jones. Guy just turned 36 years old. And that's like such a wild thing to process with the decade really that Oklahoma quarterbacks had, where it was the gold standard at the position. John Mateer is not going to break that trend after coming over from Washington State. What is your initial impression of him at Oklahoma?
Well, he's checking all the boxes. He came in not by design, not anything he decided to do, but he came in with a personality and a little bit of a flair that reminds a lot of people of Baker Mayfield, who frankly is, exalted status in Norman. Of all the quarterbacks and all the greats, Baker might be the most beloved because he had the personality and the swash and the confidence, and people just attracted to it. Mateer is a little bit along those lines. He's got a little bit of swagger to him. He comes in and just assumes the leadership mantle automatically. Really good player at Washington State. Lots of reasons to think he's going to do well. And people just automatically just anointed him as the next. And you're right, Connor. The Sooners sort of got out ahead of the rest of the nation, really, on transfer quarterbacking after Landry Jones, really. And they thought, let's use that portal if it wasn't called a portal at the time, but let's use the transfers to get guys in. They had 3 straight quarterbacks in consecutive years that went 1-1-2 in the Heisman. All 3 were imports. Adding Jalen Hurts to the list, and the freshmen that they've signed some of the best quarterbacks in America in terms of high school kids. Spencer Rattler, good quarterback, got beat out by Caleb Williams, a great quarterback. Spencer hits the road. Caleb eventually hits the road with Lincoln Riley. Dylan Gabriel, we've talked about. So, I tell people, the Oklahoma highway system is not a series of one-way highways into Norman. There are roads out of Norman too. So the same thing that's helped the Sooners have hurt the Sooners. They've got, they got NFL quarterbacks now all over the place that left school. So it's John Mateer looks the part. He looks like he'll be the next really good quarterback. If he's a great quarterback, then this season looks different. If he's just a good quarterback, we'll see. But he's certainly checked all the boxes. Looks like he's the kind of player they need.
Last year, it just felt like such a different internal vibe with Brent Venables compared to the external vibe of what people were saying about him, probably myself included, until I actually started to talk to people who know Oklahoma very well, Chris Planks of the world and people that are living and breathing this. It just... I think that extension threw a lot of people off guard, and a lot of people were all of a sudden like, "Whoa, okay, Oklahoma really does like this guy, and they're making this move, a week before they're set to join the SEC." This year, do you believe there's this strong internal belief that Venables can and will win the all-important Lincoln Riley breakout?
I think he can. It's going to be difficult because the schedule's so tough. I think Brent's going to have a good team. I don't know if they're going to have a good record. The conference schedule is so difficult, but I also think that there's a little bit. Some people disagree with me. I don't think that Brent is coaching with a ton of pressure, other than every coach feels pressure because they want to win. But that extension you talk about, that is such an advantageous contract for Brent Venables. I don't know that Oklahoma can afford to fire him, unless disaster hits. 4-8. We talk a lot. You guys talk a lot about it on the podcast. The history of buyouts. If you remember, I remember. What year did Auburn fire Gus Malzahn? After 19? Was 19?
After 20. After 20,
After
yeah.
20. Okay. Gus gets fired, and help me if I'm right, correct me. I think his buyout was either 19 or 21 million.
21 and a half, yeah.
Okay, 21 million. And the nation was aghast. In Oklahoma, we thought, what are they doing? A $21 million buyout for Gus Malzahn? That's crazy. Where does that money come from? And then 2 years later, Texas A&M fires Jimbo. $76 million, and nobody bats an eye. We just say, oh, yeah, they got the money. They got a lot of oil wells down there. They want to win. Jimbo's causing problems. Just, well, you gotta move on. And it just shows how quickly we just write off all that money. And we forget how much money $21 million is. And Brent's now, his buyout was 35 million. We forget $35 million in this day and age. You know what $35 million can do for a football roster? Just keep seven, they wouldn't have to write him a check. It'd be paid off over the years. But I just think sometimes we don't appreciate the value of all this money and what it can be used for. At Oklahoma, it can be used for a whole bunch of offensive tackles and wide receivers, and the next John Mateer that can turn. If you got Brent Venables, you got a defense. You know that. Go fund you an offense, you won't have to worry about not winning enough games. So I think Brent's actually a lot safer than most people do, just because I don't know that OU's got the money to sit around saying, hey, we'll pay off our coach and go get all these ball players.
They've never had to find out. There are certain programs that have never really had to broach the subject. In this day and age, it is such a blessing to not have to be looking at that number and to not wonder in the back of your mind, is this the type of check that we're going to have to go to all of our boosters to ask them to be able to cover? And it speaks to OU's success, but it also speaks to a very unique situation where the Stoops generation and the way that ended. Oklahoma didn't have to get to the stage that his brother got to at Kentucky right now, where they're having to wonder, are we going to have to fire our most winningest coach ever? And they didn't have to ever get to that place with Lincoln Riley because obviously he left on his own accord. And now you're kind of in this new spot. And it's going to be so interesting to see how this is talked about and if this is going to change at all. Because, man, if they go 5-7, it's curtains. Like it's curtains, and we're going to see unprecedented money. And I agree with you 100%. Like the roster might end up being better than what the record reflects, but that's kind of what you set up for. Is there a number you have in mind that'd be defined as a successful off the hot seat nationally type of season for Brent Venables?
Oh, off the hot seat nationally, I'd say eight wins.
Agreed.
Yeah, and I think that's doable. Um, the non-conference is fairly navigable. I don't, Michigan comes to town, and you need to beat Michigan. The Wolverines, were just so last year until the end of the year, beating Ohio State and Alabama. But that's a game you need to win. New quarterback, freshman quarterback, Brent Venables ought to be able to mess with his mind, all for 60 minutes. And games in Norman, need to win that one. But otherwise, 4-0 in the 4-0 in the non-conference means go 4-4 in SEC play. The schedule breaks a little bit for them in that this year they got 4 conference home games. Last year they only had 3 because they had the Texas home game, played in Dallas. So it's a little bit easier schedule just from looking at the opponents. Tennessee looks like it's down from where it was last year, not just the Nico stuff, but the Nico stuff. Is Ole Miss going to be what it was? Auburn doesn't look like it's taken a huge step. And so it looks like, they certainly should beat Missouri and Norman. They should have beat them in Columbia last year. So 8 is not a crazy, that's not a storybook year. They ought to be able to get to 8. And if they do, I think everything will be fine. You don't want to lose to Texas too many years in a row. That gets you in trouble in Norman. But people realize the Longhorns. This is a glory. The golden age. One of the golden ages for Texas football going on. So beating the Longhorns in Dallas is going to be very difficult. But Brent has done it once. Can he do it again? That would change the dynamics of the number we're talking about. That game counts for little more than one. Maybe, beat Texas and go 7-5, and you're probably, everybody's probably thinking this is all right. So a lot of dynamics on that schedule, but I do think getting to 8 would end any talk about Brent Venables' future.
Who do Oklahoma fans currently hate more, Brent Venables or Texas? Just kidding, not Brent Venables, Lincoln Riley. Let me rephrase that. Let me back up. Somebody's going to clip that, and that's going to sound really weird. Who do Oklahoma fans hate more right now, Lincoln Riley or Texas?
I actually think it's Texas. They would have to stop and think about it. It would make them stop whatever they're doing and concentrate on it. But here's the truth. There was a time they loved Lincoln Riley. There was a time they were proud of Lincoln Riley. There was a time when they were just thrilled they had Lincoln Riley and nobody else did. And they thought they had their coach for a generation. And sometimes if you'll just let your memory work, it can soften your soul a little bit. And so that's what I urge OU fans to do about Lincoln. He had a deal at his weekly radio show, or I guess it's a television show. I don't know. It's everything's simulcast so much. I don't know what you call it, but his weekly show, Teddy Lehman, the former OU linebacker, would quiz him every week. He would go back in time, 2018 Iowa State game or 2016 TCU game. Third quarter, you're up 27-7. It's 3rd and 4 from midfield. What'd you call? And Lincoln Riley could remember what he called. He'd say, well, we ran bootleg with Baker, and he dumped it off to Mark Andrews for a 14-yard gain or whatever. And OU fans would just go crazy at this guy's intellect and his memory and his ability to handle the mental side of the game. They were so proud of that. Look how smart our coach is. And when they think back to things like that, and they think back to the quarterback progression of all those great years of all those guys, I think it'll warm their heart a little bit. And I'm hard pressed to think of any warm fuzzies they ever get about Texas. So I think the quick answer would probably, emotionally, they might just say Lincoln, hate Lincoln the most. But if they think about it for 10 seconds, I think it'll go Texas.
Counterpoint, if you listen to true crime podcasts, it's not the hatred of the hatred that murderers have is often for someone they once loved. It's not for a stranger. It's not for someone that they've always had this pure hatred for. It's, that they know each other and there's this history, and that's just so hard. It's always going to be so hard to erase, and it's hard to picture what that would ever look like if that dynamic changed.
Hey, Connor, here's what I tell some OU fans when they ask me about it or when we talk about Lincoln. I say, let's say this job comes open. And maybe it's not Brent getting fired. Maybe he gets fired. Maybe he becomes the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. What if Lincoln wants to come back? Would you take it? The answer, a quick no, but in their heart of hearts, they would think, hey, maybe we need to have Lincoln back. So I think you're right. There's a lot of emotion. I'm taught on Law and Order and Dragnet and all the great cop shows of all time that, where does all the hate come from? It comes from love originally. But I actually think there's a little bit of space in their heart still for Lincoln Riley.
Scott Frost went back to UCF. Rich Rodriguez went back to West Virginia. We're just saying, the reunions are kind of in vogue. Yeah, just saying. Speaking of breakups, it's ironic that everyone right now in college football is kind of talking about the Josh Heupel, Nico Iamaleava breakup. When last year, the breakup that everyone was dissecting was the Heupel-Oklahoma breakup. And leading up to that game, the buildup was tremendous. It was kind of, a dream for people like us that write and talk about this stuff. But you saw that emotion that Heupel had after winning that game, what that meant to him. As much as he downplayed it, it still felt really significant. What's the sense that you get with the current state of the Heupel-Oklahoma relationship? Is there any more bad blood there to be had?
Oh, I think, first of all, I think the ice is slowly melting, and maybe not even slowly. I think it's melting at a pretty rapid race. When you win, when you get the last laugh, you lose a lot of the animosity. So I think Josh is in a pretty good place. And, most of Josh's animosity was not directed at the institution or many of the people. It was mostly at Bob Stoops and probably a little bit at Joe Castiglione. And um, these are two pretty high quality people, and Josh knows that. He knows that. And even before last year's game, there were some, Stoops told me the story, that Josh had come up to him at the College Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony or weekend and congratulated him, and it meant the world to Bob for Josh to do that. It wasn't any kind of great reunion, but just Josh reaching out meant the world to Bob. And so, Heupel's he's been getting better on this. So I think it's slowly getting back to where it's not a bad place anymore. And the best revenge is live well, and restoring the tradition and the success at Tennessee makes for a pretty good life. It's a pretty good place to coach football, Rocky Top. And when you've won like Heupel has, beating Alabama, making the college football playoff, doing all those things, he's a hero in a place that's a pretty good place to be a hero in. And life's turned out pretty good for him. His career's going really well. So I think it's, and Josh is a quality person too. I don't know of anybody that says otherwise. So he knows that. I think he's in a pretty good place, and I think that's going to get better and better.
You just threw out the idea of Lincoln Riley potentially a return, what that ever could look like if that possibility, just that hypothetical. If Venables does indeed get fired, and I'm not saying that's this year, would you ever expect Oklahoma to just write Josh Heupel a blank check to return to Norman?
He'd be the first call, I assume. I have no idea if Josh would would entertain the notion or accept. I have no idea. I do know this. He still has a lot of ties, family still lives here. His sister married the son of David Boren, the 24-year OU president, prominent president. David Boren died last year, but his Josh's son-in-law, his brother-in-law is a former United States congressman, prominent Oklahoman. So they got a lot of Oklahoma ties still. So I don't think he would dismiss it. I also think it'd be a very popular choice. I don't know that he would do it. Like I said, Tennessee's a pretty good place to coach football. But, the thing about the Sooners is in their history, they've hired one head coach. They've always hired an assistant, often from promoting from within, but also going out and getting somebody with Oklahoma ties or non-Oklahoma ties off another staff. And they've been incredibly successful with that model. Is this the kind of time when you change that and you actually go get an established head coach? If you want to change what you've always done, Josh Heupel's a pretty good reason to do it. So I think he would be the first call they would make. But I don't, I have no idea how Josh would feel about that. But I do think it's something he would have to at least consider.
Let's get you out of here with a story of your choosing. Let's go in the Wayback Machine here and talk about things that happened before I was even born. Give me your favorite story, either from covering Brian Bosworth or the greatest that never was, Marcus Dupree.
Marcus Dupree is the best. Marcus Dupree was such a child in a man's body. And I don't mean a simple child, but he got here at 18. He's bigger than everybody. He's faster than everybody. And he was literally an 18-year-old kid who hadn't had a lot of guidance growing up, and then comes to Oklahoma with virtually no guidance around him. And it's, he was here 15 months or so. 14 months. And we look back and say, what happened to Marcus Dupree and how could it go wrong? I think when I look back at Marcus Dupree, I think, how did it go right as long as it did? I mean, this guy had the world at his tail and really wasn't prepared for it. I mean, this guy was Herschel Walker. He was, Adrian Peterson. He's whoever, whatever great massive running back you want to grab. And he just wasn't prepared for that spotlight or that commitment. Barry Switzer has talked about how he thinks he failed Marcus, didn't really realize the extent to which Marcus needed some protection and some guidance. But the thing I liked about Marcus is he was really a nice fella. I mean, those were the days 40 years ago. You just go to practice. After practice, just go talk to whoever you wanted to. You didn't have to call and say, hey, can I get a interview with Marcus Dupree? And they say, well, we'll check with coach, or we'll try to pencil you in 4 weeks from now. Just go to practice and grab Marcus Dupree after practice. And he was just a nice fella, down to earth kid from Philadelphia, Mississippi. And years later, Oklahoma State played at Mississippi State in September of 1998, I think it was. And we go down to Mississippi to cover the game. And we make arrangements. At the time, Marcus had a son, Marquez, playing high school football for Philadelphia, Mississippi. And we made arrangements to meet up with Marcus and watch the game with him and watch his son play high school football in somewhere in Mississippi. And just the natural hospitality that Marcus Dupree had, just willing to talk about his son and his days at Oklahoma. And I just remember thinking, sitting here on the sidelines of a high school football field in Philadelphia, in Mississippi, talking with Marcus Dupree about his son and everything he's gone through. And then years later, of course, Marcus since comes back to Oklahoma all the time, signs autographs, is pretty popular around town for a guy that's really only played a year at Oklahoma. But just one of the all-time great what could have been stories for a really pretty good guy who just was put in a situation not of his doing, and just an unfortunate byproduct of the time and the way college football was back then.
Something to be said for it. And it's an all-time 30 for 30 for those who haven't seen it. And just a great reminder that you need to go in the right situation. You need to be, with the right people, with Herschel. The Vince Dooley guidance was such a big part of his career that probably doesn't get talked about enough. And the things that he would do of like getting a police escort after quickly realizing his freshman year how much everybody just wanted a piece of him. And there were certain things that you talk about with Barry Switzer that, yeah, he probably could have done differently with Marcus Dupree. That could have changed his entire trajectory, even before the bowl game when he was talking about how, or like after the bowl game, he goes off and he's talking about, well, he was out of shape. And it's like, well, dude just ran for like 250 yards in a bowl game. What are you doing? It's your
239 yards against Arizona State in the Fiesta Bowl. And Switzer said it could have been more. That's an example of the demands on this 18-year-old kid. He has a game for the ages. People want more.
Yeah, would never happen in this day and age, needless to say. Yeah. Barry, really appreciate the time. Everybody go follow Barry's work, Tulsa World. You've been doing it for a really long time. And I know people obviously look to you as a voice in that community and know that it really means a lot. So appreciate you doing this and look forward to seeing you at SEC Media Days again this year.
Hey, thank you, Connor. And thanks for keeping me up to date on all things SEC. I go to your podcast every week. And really has helped me get baptized into the conference.
Thank you, man. Really appreciate that. All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. You want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to start. I'm going to do a last of the week. It's been a minute since we've had a last of the week. My good friend, Katrina Dembinski, she got married this past weekend, soon to be Katrina Sapika. Got married this past weekend. That's why I was out of town. Lauren, Claire, and I flew to Chicago last Wednesday, and then got to spend a couple of days at my mom's house. And then my mom's fiance has a country house just over the border in Wisconsin, and it was 20 minutes from the wedding venue. And it was beautiful.
That sounds awesome.
It was. It really, really was. Just drove up there on Friday. We went to the wedding on Saturday. Had an absolutely great time. I was splitting some logs. I got a massive black and blue bruise on my shin.
For splitting logs?
For splitting logs, man.
Come on now.
A ricochet right back at my shin. It was not pretty. Just swelled
How was that
up massively.
telling Lauren? Was she there? Were you like, hey, babe, I was splitting logs.
I
Was nice in there for me?
I showed her the bruise within 5 minutes. I was like,
You
Lord.
got to.
I was like, Lord, get out of here. This thing is gnarly. Look at this.
I was just providing warmth to our hearth.
Yeah, literally was trying to get wood for the fire, but yeah, had a great time, and the wedding was beautiful. If anybody who lives in the Midwest has ever been to Lake Geneva, the Lake Geneva Golf Club is immaculate. I mean, it's unreal. But yeah, had ourselves an awesome time. Then flew back on Sunday. Two questions, Will. Two questions, because I found myself pondering these questions during a night in which, having a great time, got to see all my high school friends and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, your boy got mentioned in the Matron of Honor speech because Katrina is the best friend of my high school girlfriend. Matron of Honor was my high school girlfriend. Mentioned high school boyfriends. Just like, shout out Connor in a room full of 100 people. Gave a little salute.
Wow, this is like one of those Meet the Parents style movies. You're cutting wood. You're meeting this is awesome, dude.
Yeah,
you're in Wisconsin.
It was a carpe diem weekend, man. It really was. There's a lot going on, and all the while, like still, was watching, dialed in the NFL draft and all that stuff as well. So, but yeah, two questions. What is the best wedding song for dancing?
Oh man,
if you say anything with instructions, I'm gonna puke.
No, honestly, I'll defer this one to you, man. I don't even have a structured opinion on this. Yeah.
Okay, because I used to think that the song that was played probably most often at weddings, September, Earth, Wind, and Fire, was up there. And I think it still is. But just in terms of dancing itself, Shut Up and Dance With Me. A little Shake It Off.
Okay.
Taylor Swift. I'm impartial. Well, I'm very partial to Return of the Mac. Not getting played at a whole lot of weddings, should be. But those two are the ones that I'm like, yeah, that really got things going.
Yeah, see, my answer, that's why I waited. My answer would have been Shout. I love Shout so much.
First song that was played, Will.
Yep.
First song of the night. That's too early for Shout.
Yep.
Too early.
It truly gets the people going. Like you could do some. Shout out to our boy Matthew Golden from Texas. He walked out to one of my favorite songs, International Players Anthem. I think that goes well for the younger crowd. You have to get the censored version at weddings, but it can make kind of the older folks cringe a little bit. But Shout is the PG. Everybody gets down to Shout.
You're right. There are those isolation songs on the dance floor. A few of those that came on. Petey Pablo comes on. The over 50 crowd probably not making their way out to the hardwood. Let's just say that. But all right. So, other question: what's the best wedding drink? Because I have a very specific answer for this.
Interesting. I keep it simple at weddings. I always kind of feel bad for drinking people's booze. That's my like little.
They've already paid for it. No.
I know. I just try to keep it simple. I'll get I just go standard. And now if they have house cocktails, I'll get those. But if I have to get one, I just get a rum and coke and keep it pushing.
That's a good choice. Good choice. I think gin and tonic is the best, and here's why.
Similar. Yep.
Nobody knows when you switch to water.
Oh.
Nobody knows. I switched to water at 10 o'clock. That wedding went till 11:30. For like 80% of the time we're out there dancing. It was a high volume wedding, high usage rate your boy had at that wedding. We had a great time, but nobody knew that at 10 o'clock, Two Beer Connor. I was not Two Beer Connor on Saturday night for what it's worth. I made the switch to water seamless.
Genius.
Never even came up. Nobody could ever look at me and go, buddy, what are you doing? My friends probably had like 4 drinks after that point. Nope. Just started pounding waters at 10 o'clock.
See, I do that, but I just switched to standard Coke or like Diet Coke, and then I got kind of a second wind. But then everybody's coming down and I'm coming up, so it's a mystery box.
I like that.
Yeah, but yeah, congrats to them, man. It's awesome.
All right, who you got? You said you were going NFL draft related.
Yes, I'm going to keep this one quick. So, guys, there's a gentleman drafted first overall the other day. I don't know if you guys saw it.
Who was it?
His name's Cam Ward. He has one of the most insane stories anyone's ever had, and I feel like we got so caught up with Mel Kiper and Shadur Sanders, and there's time to talk about that Tyler Shuck and all that stuff. But this is a gentleman who was a 0-star recruit. He went to Incarnate Word, whose football team, like their season was pushed back to the spring because of COVID. That's how long ago this was. This dude went from Incarnate Word, didn't even start there, sat on the bench, gets a year starter, parlays that in the Washington State. We all know, whatever happened in Washington State, all the coaches left, boom, he ends up at Miami. Miami is a place that's been cursed for like 20 years. And I was joking with my Miami buddy the other day where I was like, the least possible outcome here was that this quarterback with this story, who also happens to be black in a year that we keep talking about race during the draft, right? He is just bona fide the number one pick. He comes over from this crazy path. He leads and stabilizes Miami's offense. He's pretty much everything they need him to be. And yet Miami still does not make the SEC championship game. And guess who does? SMU. And so point being, that just goes on to highlight how much harder his job was than we even thought. They somehow found the only Cajuns that can't coach defense over there. I don't understand it. They got Guidry and some, they got some Chevis Jackson, those good boys. I hope they all end up at LSU, but wasn't their stop. So I thought it was going to be a defensive team where they had this stretch for a quarterback that the lights were too bright for him, honestly. And he comes out, he leads Miami. The defense obviously lets them down. He gets picked overall. And it's like nobody cares about any of it. And I'm like, dude, this guy has this insane story. He's a great guy by all accounts. He's the type of guy, like, from what I hear, first one in, last one out, great leader, has like his celebration that catches on. And I'm just really rooting for him, man. And I hope he gets his day, in the sun. But given his personality, I think he likes it better this way anyway.
You know who else went to Incarnate Word? Zach Calzada.
Oh, man.
I'm just saying. We're all about the underdog. We're
talking about undergrad here.
Yeah, true. All right, fair enough. Yes, you're right. Cam Ward was totally overlooked. Probably should have been brought up a whole lot more. A boring ho-hum number one overall pick. I hope Cam Ward does ridiculous things in the NFL. Be fun to watch. Really good. All right, today's pod brought to you by Dabble. If you are just getting involved in the DFS space, you're like, hey, I need some action in the NBA playoffs, Dabble is going to have you covered. Use that promo code SDS2. Get $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Leave us a 5-star review. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch every single episode of the Saturday Down South podcast. Follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Sat Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.